Picture a desert dune, thousands of tons of sand baking in the sun. If you look at this giant dune, there's absolutely no doubt about what you're seeing. It is a heap of sand. Now, imagine you walk up to that massive pile and carefully pluck away exactly one single grain. Has anything really changed? Of course not. You wouldn't suddenly say the pile is gone. It is still undeniably a heap of sand. But what if you keep going? You take away another grain and then another. If you repeat this process long enough, you'll eventually be left with just a few grains, and then nothing. So at what exact pole did the heap stop being a heap? One grain seems totally meaningless on its own, yet pulling them away one by one eventually destroys the entire pile. There has to be a transition point, but we can't seem to find it. Let's bring this a little closer to home. Imagine a friend who has a thick, full head of hair. One morning, he wakes up and finds a single strand of hair on his pillow. You wouldn't look at him and say he's bald. The next day, he loses a second hair, then a third. Again, he still has a full head of hair. As those individual hairs fall out over the years, which specific hair is the one that tips the scale? We know how this process ends. He is eventually left with a completely smooth scalp, totally bald. But try to point to the exact afternoon where the transition happened. You can't. Let's try looking at this through time. You're in the kitchen making breakfast, and you fill a blender with large, solid chunks of chopped fruit. You hit the blend button for exactly 1 second and stop. If you pour that out, you don't have a drink. You just have slightly bruised fruit chunks. You press the button for 1 more second. It's getting mushy, but it's still not a smoothie. If you let it run, it will become a perfectly smooth liquid. But can you identify the precise, magical second where the solid chunks officially become a drink? Sand, hair, fruit. In all 3 cases, a massive transformation happens right in front of us, but our inability to pinpoint the exact moment of change shows that something is off in how we measure reality. These 3 scenarios all trick our brains using the exact same underlying logic. They rely on a rule. Taking away one piece is too small to notice, so a tiny change doesn't matter. But strictly following that logic hits a brick wall. If one grain never makes a difference, neither do 2 or 3. We end up trapped in an impossible loop where the sand never vanishes, the man never goes bald, and the fruit never blends. Fortunately, we don't live inside a rigid logic puzzle. We live in the physical world. And in the physical, real world, the wind eventually blows away the entire dune. Hairlines recede. Breakfast gets made. Because we can see the massive change happening with our own eyes, that trusted rule, the idea that tiny steps don't matter, must be broken. Philosophers have been debating this exact problem for thousands of years. It's called the Sorites Paradox. That name comes from the ancient Greek word soros, which translates to heap. This contradiction happens because human language is much stiffer than the physical world it tries to describe. Our words require strict, clear categories to communicate. We need hard labels. But physical objects rarely follow the clean binary rules of human grammar. Words act like rigid buxoms. They force us to sort the world into clear opposites. Either you have a pile or you don't. Reality, however, moves along a smooth, blurry gradient. It flows through millions of tiny, unremarkable states without crossing a magical boundary line. This is why it's so frustrating to wait for a single moment of success or becoming healthy. Because there is no magic dividing line, your brain struggles to recognize the change while it's actually happening. Success is just like a heap of sand. It's an accumulation of thousands of unremarkable grains. You will never see the exact second the pile forms, but that doesn't mean the individual grains aren't working. Progress is built in the steps that are too small to see.